This summer, serve up the Cookout Classics, Oscar Mayer hot dogs and Heinz mustard. Grill up a dog, add classic yellow mustard, or loaded Chicago style. We all know it's not a cookout without Oscar Mayer and Heinz.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
When I was starting to go through some of these cool clinics, when I first started, with the offensive line here, was drills need to show up on film. When big moments happen, we got to fall back on our training. And, that's the one thing where you can see, like, we're playing in some big games and some big moments. And what we see is we see the drill work and we see things from practice are showing up in those big games and those big moments.
Welcome to another episode of the Mushroom Society podcast here on the Coach and Coordinator Network. Today's episode features Dan Larson from North Dakota State, sharing the philosophy, fundamentals, and teaching approach behind one of the most respected offensive line cultures in college football. Coach Larson talks about what it really takes to coach the position, why North Dakota State keeps things simple, how they build physicality, and why the best drill work has to show up on game day. This is offensive line teaching from a program built on toughness, detail, and tradition. And if you want more of this, make sure you get your ticket for the 43rd Cool Clinic, May 14th through 16th. For over 40 years, the Cool Clinic has been the meeting place for offensive line coaches who want to get better. This year includes Hall of Fame keynote speaker Dick Vermeil, Super Bowl and Grey Cup championship coaches, college football playoff coaches, and some of the best offensive line minds in the game. Go to thecoolclinic.com and get your ticket. The link is in the show notes. Here's our episode with Coach Larson.
All right, guys. We're getting towards the end of the evening. We saved the best for the last. Okay, so Dan Larson, okay, they won the championship. I got more phone calls that saying, hey, you should talk to the guy at North Dakota State. You should get him to speak at the clinic. You can't imagine the number of people said that to me. I'll do that. So I called him up. He's the offensive line coach. About 2 weeks ago, he called me back. He says, Coach, I took the coordinator's job here. I'm coaching the tight ends. Is that going to make a difference in the clinic? I said, hell no. That's okay with me. Does a great job. I just watched some of the practice. There's a lot of guys working at one time. That's what I like as a coach. You know what I mean? I don't like guys standing around. Get everybody, as many guys as you can, to work at one time with just watching the practice, and he does that. So that's enough for me on this soapbox. Dan, love to have you. Glad you said yes. And they're your guys. Go ahead, take them.
I appreciate it, Coach. Thank you. Yeah, this is a pretty cool deal for North Dakota State, the opportunity for us to talk about our program here a little bit and the offensive line play. And I was nervous. I know how big of a deal this is to speak at the Cool Clinic, being able to represent the offensive line here at North Dakota State. But, we're going to coach the tight ends here just like we coach the O-line. So we're, when it comes to run blocking at least, and hopefully they run a little faster than some of our O-linemen when we're out for routes. But I did want to say thank you. It's a pretty interesting journey that that I've had here in getting to the offensive line coach. When I started here in 2019, I was a running backs coach. And, AJ Blazek, now the offensive line coach at Wisconsin, was the offensive line coach here, and was really fortunate to work and learn, from him as a running backs coach. And I'd been a coordinator, I'd been a head coach. And, as a lot of us probably have either been around coordinators and head coaches, when I raised my hand, I was one of these guys. We got to block them better. And, there's a lot of easy answers out there when you're not sitting in the chair and having to, get 5 guys coached up and handle everything. And so if there's one positive that came from a North Dakota State and having to play a COVID spring was AJ had opportunities to move on. And we had to play a spring season within 2 weeks leading up to January to play football. And I was really fortunate that Coach Matt Entz, the head coach at the time, had some faith and belief that somebody that never coached offensive line before, could handle the job. And, I think the biggest thing from my standpoint was all of a sudden I started recognizing even more so just, how hard coaching this position is and how much time and effort and detail goes into it. So, any offensive line coach, Peter Liu, Mike McHugh, Mark Davies, just the guys that I had an opportunity to work with, when I was a head coach or a coordinator, I apologize that I never, gave you probably the amount of credit that you need to have in order to coach the position. And it takes a lot. You're really fortunate when you get an opportunity to coach great players like I've had here. But when you are working maybe even sometimes without the best linemen, the amount of time and effort that still goes into it because of the pride that is taken with the position is something that's really special. And until I sat in the chair and sat in the room, I probably didn't recognize that part of it as much. And, I think what it allowed me to do was you walk into a room and you're not the smartest guy in the room. I didn't know as much from an offensive line technique as some of the players that were sitting in there. And so really what I had to do was I had to get back to learning football again. And the first place I started and I started diving into was this clinic and going back and watching as many videos and picking up on nuances. And I didn't coach a lot of technique that first spring, but I would always try to pick something up, 2 or 3 nights a week where I could watch something on my own and pick up 2 or 3 coaching points that I knew I could carry over into some of the basics and the fundamentals that we were working on here. And this place in the community of the offensive line, I was incredibly fortunate that anybody that I called picked up the phone, gave me time to talk about it. And if there's anything that from a question standpoint, as I'm talking, I hope that you guys feel free to interrupt. If there's anything that, I could help expand upon a little bit in terms of how we do here, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Again, to speak and be a part of this clinic is a huge honor from a coaching standpoint, because this community gave me a lot and gave me an opportunity, I think, to continue to improve. Over the course of the last 5 seasons that I was the offensive line coach here, it was because of a lot of people that either had spoke at this clinic, picked up the phone call because maybe this clinic opened up some doors and had the opportunity to talk to people. And so I'm truly appreciative. Talking about tonight really is just some of the basics and the fundamentals that, we do here at North Dakota State. It is really centered around man blocking. It's centered around, really man blocking is showing up more and more and more, I think, at our level. Amount of different movements and pressures, run game pressures that we're continuing to see. We have to be able to block people at the line of scrimmage, great fundamentals and techniques. We don't work a lot of techniques, and I'll get into it a little bit in terms of kind of why that is. But what we try to do is we try to play with great fundamentals. We try to play with great day one technique, and then we just try to play as physically and as hard as we possibly can. I believe if we do that over the course of 4 quarters, we're going to have an opportunity to give our team and our offense to be successable. So I'm going to dive into it right now. Like I said, really appreciate this opportunity. And anytime that guys have any questions or anything like that, don't hesitate to hop in. Let me know how I can explain something better, whatever that might be. Like I talked about, man blocking, right, our fundamentals and techniques in the run game. The biggest thing I just, wanted to start this with just talking a little bit about some of the philosophies that we have here. And this is something I did a couple of years ago. We've had a lot of great players that have come through here. We've also had a lot of we've had a lot of great O-line coaches that have been here. And, Scott Fuchs, Connor Riley, like I mentioned, AJ Blazik, guys that had kind of laid the groundwork. When you sit down in this chair and you go into that room, you're just trying to uphold the standard of what they want to do. And some of that from a player standpoint was coming back to some of the standards that had been set with the guys before them. And, I'm never afraid, to talk to our guys about, tradition we're trying to uphold here. And part of that means that you got to go back and you got to learn from some other people. Coach Wiley talked about when he called me and had talked about invited me to come and speak at this clinic. Well, we ended up talking for an hour. And when I say talking, it was me listening to Coach Wiley coach. And I'm writing down notes. I was out recruiting in Chicago, trying to go meet up and have dinner with another coach that was in the area. And I ended up being on the phone for like an hour and 15 minutes, listening and taking notes. So never afraid to learn, never afraid to ask questions. I think we can always improve upon, what we're trying to do. And I think that goes with the players as well, too, understanding where we're coming from. But this is really our philosophy, that we got about 10 things that we lean on. And this is, 5 of those that I really want to talk about. But we want to be brilliant at the basics and want to play with great habits. And we don't do a lot of technique. I think in order to get a little bit more technique and tools in the toolbox, I think you got to earn that as a player. If we can't be brilliant at the basics, I can't teach you 2 or 3 different techniques. We started all of our freshman offensive line with 2-hand punches. And part of that is because we want them to learn how to set a man. And we believe in independent hands. We believe in one arm is longer than 2, and so we do believe in that mentality. But when our guys get here, they're going to start with the basics. And the basics is you got to set the man. And then we work on covering, the crotch with the near thigh and punch, throw your hands. And then as our guys start understanding they can do that, then we progress them into what's the next part of it, right? It's throwing the outside hand. It's where, high, low from an independent hand standpoint. We do the same thing with the run game. And really this came from the standpoint of 2 years ago, right? We had some really good upperclassmen graduate, move on. All of a sudden now we got to get to young players, got to get caught up fast. And man, all of a sudden they get caught into thinking, okay, should I be using this technique this week? We just wanted to keep it simple. We want to let those guys cut it loose and play fast. And that was something that, was taught to me really early here by our offense coordinator when I started here, Tyler Roll. And Tyler that was one of his main things. We want to play fast, cut these guys loose, don't put a lot of thoughts in their head, put the important thoughts in their head, and then let them go. And it's probably one of the best things about me not having a whole lot of O-line experience coming here was my brain was kind of empty when it came to it. All I could really do was coach and learn the basics to start. And then as I became more comfortable and felt like I could add something from a technique standpoint, a fundamental standpoint, and now I was starting to, maybe I could expand upon this and give these upperclassmen and these older guys, these veterans, a little bit more tools to go and operate with that we can maybe go into during a game if all of a sudden we were getting caught by a different technique or movement from the line of scrimmage. But it comes back to we want to be brilliant at the basics. We want to play great habits. We want to see and play the game through one set of eyes. I think my job Sunday through Friday is to get these guys to see and understand why we like what we like and how we want to go about accomplishing it. If they can see it through how we see it as coaches and they believe in it, and part of the reason why they believe in it is because I think we're so convicted coming out of a meeting room. Then what I'm hoping is that then I'm seeing it through their sets of eyes, 5 sets of eyes, is playing as one on Saturday. And, the iPad part of it's been great to have on the sideline. I think sometimes it's more about me confirming what these guys are telling me and seeing, especially if I'm missing something from down on the field level. But like all of a sudden they're, the shade's a little bit tighter or, this 3 technique is playing a little bit wider. And sometimes you can't always see those things from the sideline. And so, being able to hear it and see it through what their eyes are, but it starts with, myself as a coach coordinating, right, in terms of what, we are doing from an offensive line standpoint, leading there. And I think part of that is the trust aspect of it. And I'm building trust with these guys on a daily basis, and they're building it with their teammates. They're building it through drill work. They're building it through summer work. And then when you start getting that, then you start getting the trust of those around you, right, from an individual standpoint or a coach. I've heard multiple coaches talk about this so far, and it was one of the big things that, when I was starting to go through some of these cool clinics, when I first started, with the offensive line here, was drills need to show up on film. When big moments happen, we got to fall back on our training. And, that's the one thing, I've got, I put some film on there from really 21, 22, 23, 24, where you can see like we're playing in some big games and some big moments. And what we see is we see the drill work and we see things from practice are showing up in those big games and those big moments. And that's just something I think comes from the repetition aspect of it. And again, brilliant at the basics. Our guys can always fall back on the basics of a run game if they need to. Okay. The second to these last 2 points are the last 2 out of the 10 that we have when we talk about our philosophy here and the philosophy of the Rams. Which is, a nickname that all offensive lines had here since the 70s. But our style of play, and really what I'm talking about is our physicality, is equally as important as our fundamentals and our technique. There's going to be time where we're going to have a bad first step. There's going to be times where we have a bad second step. Our hands are going to be too wide. We're not going to have the best of leverage. But if we're having a physical and a physicality mentality to us, right, in terms of how we want to play, dictate the terms, be the first one to throw the punch, And if we're not the first one, better be dang close to being the last one. And so, we really believe our style of play at times, right, can overtake if we're not having great fundamentals, if we're not playing with great technique. Man, we can play a little bit harder and we're willing to do a little bit more physical for a little bit longer. We still got a shot at having a successful play. And then we want to finish. And finish is something we practice. When we get to the film, right, and I apologize, I'm taking so long to get there, but when we get to the film, I put good and bad on there. We're not perfect here, not even close. But I think the one thing we do is we keep coaching our guys on the little things I think allow us to win plays, win reps, series, games, and a big part of that is finishing. And we want to win with great, TOP. And when I got here, same thing. You thought that stood for time of possession. North Dakota State, we talk about time of physicality. And so, we want to strain, right? Doesn't matter how long we're on the field for. If we're on the field for 22 minutes, we want that to be the most physical football for 22 minutes. If we can grind it and it's in the upper 20s and the 30s like we like it, we want that to be done with great physicality. And so to win a time of physicality is something that, again, taught to me when I got here. Our head coach preaches it to this day. It is, right, from our standpoint, one of the standards that we have here, when it comes to, game day weeks.
Before we get back to the episode, this is exactly why the Mushroom Society exists. You hear Coach Larson talking about being brilliant at the basics, building habits, training on bodies, eliminating separation, and getting drill work to show up on film. That's the kind of teaching offensive line coaches need to access all year, not just one weekend. Inside the Mushroom Society, you get the archive of questions and answer sessions, interviews, roundtables, and offensive line teaching sessions built for coaches who live in this world every day. It's a place to keep learning, finding answers, and sharpening how you teach the position. Go to mushroom-society.com and join the Mushroom Society. Being part of the Mushroom Society also includes your ticket to the Cool Clinic. You can find that again at mushroom-society.com or click the link in the description.
So the fundamentals that we go into on a daily basis, right? We don't use a lot of equipment. If we're using equipment, it's a version of a shoot. But we want to block bodies. We want to train on bodies because we do block bodies. And the one thing I honestly think the back of my brain, I can hear, right, watching a film of Coach Skarnecchia talking about, we're getting extra conditioning, we're getting extra training. Our guys are having to feel and what it's like when they have bad, shoulder pad leverage, when they have bad hands. And so it just has been a part of what we wanted to do here for right, wrong, and different. We've worked a little bit at times on the Crowder sled. We've worked a little bit. We used to have heavy bags that we really liked from a pull circuit standpoint. And we've kind of just gone away from it. And we want to block bodies. We want to keep our guys on the move. We want to keep them engaged. I don't want a ton of guys standing around if we can help it. So by having guys play defense when they come from offense and jogging back, because they have to get a rep in right on defense. And after they just took a rep on offense, I think there's a lot of different facets where that's a really valuable tool for us here. We want to eliminate separation in the run game. This is a run game fundamental. And, throw the first punch. I played defensive line in college. When it was in the run game, right, we wanted to create separation as a defensive lineman so we could play off of blocks. We want to eliminate it now as an offensive lineman. I want to get into their space. When we're pass rushing from a defensive standpoint, we're trying to get into their space as much as I possibly can, right? Offensively, right, line-wise, we're trying to create as much separation and pass blocking as we possibly can. So when it comes to run game fundamentals, everything we're trying to do at first level, second level, block a corner, block a safety, we're trying to eliminate separation. We do want to try to stay as square as we possibly can from a line of scrimmage standpoint, really no matter the technique and no matter the scheme that we're playing, right? We want to try to stay as square as we possibly can. We believe in vertical and horizontal leverage here. Coach Barnett from Iowa, again, another guy that opened up the doors and got an opportunity to spend a couple days around him when he started as the offensive line coach at Iowa. Big part of what their program talks about at every single position is vertical and horizontal leverage. And our head coach, Coach Polisek, was the offensive line coach at Iowa for 3 seasons, has a lot of respect for that program. And, a lot of things that are fundamental truths to who they are down there are part of what we have adopted adapted and have brought in and made a part of North Dakota State's football culture as well too. And then, hip level over pad level. And again, go back to the things that I had talked about when I was a young coach. Man, I talked about pad level all the time. Listening to Coach Heck, Kansas City Chiefs, do one of these cool clinics a couple years ago. And again, willing to pick up a phone call from me, willing to take a FaceTime and talk through a couple things I had questions on. But he really stressed hip level. I mean, you think about it, your hips, right? We want to bend, right? Our knees, that should bring our hip level down, which should allow us to control our pad level. And, probably as a younger coach, I talked about pad level, and all of a sudden we're 6'5", we're 6'6", and we're having a block of 5'11" offensive line or defensive linemen. That's really tough to get your pad level without sinking your hips. And so it was something that we adopted into our program here, probably about 3 years ago. Myself and Coach Roll coaching the tight ends at that point in time, something we started talking about a lot at the line of scrimmage was our hip level. We wanted to match or exceed who we were playing against. And that really came down to, again, bending our knees, playing in an athletic football position. But that's just some of our fundamental truths that we try to hold on to here at NDSU. Just zone philosophy as we start kind of trending into, film and some man blocking techniques and some drills that we do. From a zone scheme standpoint, okay, we want to get on man blocks as fast as possible. I'm talking more inside zone right now, okay? But, we want to get on man blocks and we want to get, into defenders as fast as we possibly can. We're never going to pass up a natural double team. I'll have examples of what I'm talking about when it comes to that. But we want to get on these man blocks as fast as possible. We're going to run off the ball. And, as we talk through zone man blocks, gap scheme man blocks, as we talk through, pin pull, right, G scheme man blocks. But one thing that we talk about in all these situations, and I'll try to hit on it every single time, is the tempo of the play. And I think that's something that we've adapted here over the course of the last couple of years and have really started to talk to our guys about. We can change the tempo at the line of scrimmage. And the one way that we're going to change it when we talk to about our zone scheme is we're going to run off the ball. And we are trying to get on blocks as fast as possible. And, big part of, again, don't overcoaching and don't overcoach the first step. Biggest thing is we want to limit losing ground. Young coach, I shouldn't even say young, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? You're talking about first steps and, 6-inch first step and, hey, we're trying to open the toe a little bit. And it's a lot of thought happening, as the ball's getting snapped is what that first step is doing. And that was one thing that I picked up really early, from just, okay, what's something that's, you're learning, right? And I'm learning something here that seems really simple, but at the end of the day, like, man, I overcoached the first step a ton when I was a young coach. Biggest thing is we want to allow the first step, okay? Don't limit losing ground, but that first step wants to allow our second step to get on the aiming point and get going. And so we want our second step to gain ground on the line of scrimmage. We want to be playing with that backside knee through the crotch of the defender. We do get the second level blocks, okay? Second level man blocks, right? Especially in the zone scheme. The tempo of defender, that's going to determine what tempo we're playing with. The faster they're playing, the faster we're trying to get on, right, our angle, okay, and get on our block, right, on the second level. If the defender's playing fast, we play fast. If that defender's playing slow, we want to quicken and widen our feet, all right, on contact, and then we're trying to run our knees again, okay? And then all this is done with great vertical and horizontal leverage, okay? And just, reemphasize the point from a second level man block standpoint, the linebackers set the tempo of the double team. The faster the linebackers play, the more that we got to be pushing through. If linebacker's going to sit there, okay, we should stay on the aiming point. And so there's great carryover from our zone scheme and how we talk to like our duo play, okay, which I think you can marry both of those up. It was awesome listening to Coach McNally talk yesterday. But, we can change the tempo a little bit. We're fast getting on the linebackers. Linebackers are playing slow. Okay, let's be thicker and be a little bit heavier. Maybe we live in the duo world a little bit longer. But the linebackers really set the tempo of the double team. So the two different zone techniques that we work, right? Line of scrimmage oriented, tight reach and wide reach. Tight reach is inside zone. Play side aiming points, the play side number. Wide reach, right? From our standpoint, or play side aiming point, but now we're talking more of the armpit, okay? And those are more like if we're on the front side, from our standpoint here at NDSU, that's more if we're in a double team. If we're in man blocks, we tighten those up just a little bit, all right? We still want the running off the ball, but we'll tighten up those aiming points when we're in man blocks a little bit more, okay? When we talk vertical leverage, we want every play to start with great vertical leverage. Now, that means we're trying to put our shoulder pad under their chin. You know, it's been fascinating learning, right, from other coaches and how they, in other levels, you know, about trying to create length on the line of scrimmage. You know, we're probably just a little bit different than that right now. It doesn't matter the scheme. We want to create vertical leverage, and we want to get a shoulder pad under a chin. Horizontal leverage to us, that means that we're playing with our tight elbows, all right? Elbows are in tight and tight hands. And horizontal leverage, we're trying to really play underneath the chest pad, okay, of the D lineman. It's really where we're trying to play. But if our elbows are in tight, our hands are in tight, that's great horizontal leverage. We're playing this way, vertical leverage straight up and down, that's pad under chin. Like I mentioned before, the first step allows the second step to gain ground on the crotch and the defender. Okay, that's both tight reach and wide reach for us. And then we talk about a backside vertical string. And we want the backside knee, elbow, and shoulder pad. There should be a line on the backside of that. The pad's connected to the elbow's connected to the knee. Like all that is just in one line right there on the backside. And then, like I mentioned, we're trying to run off the ball. We're trying to bend our knees, our hip level staying down, our feet are underneath us, and we're running. And then we always want to dictate the finish. That part, all those things right there should show up in our Indy everyday drills. If I'm talking too loud, actually, just make sure someone tells me that part of it too, because otherwise I keep going, right? But I get excited coaching football, and I get excited talking here. But we want to dictate the finish, and we want to be running off the football more than anything else.
That's it for today's episode of the Mushroom Society podcast. A big takeaway from Coach Larson is that offensive line play does not have to be complicated to be detailed. North Dakota State wants to be brilliant at the basics, play with great habits, see the game through one set of eyes, and make their physicality show up snap after snap. If you want to keep learning from coaches like this, get your ticket for the 43rd Cool Clinic, May 14th through 16th. You'll hear Hall of Fame coach Dick Vermeil, championship coaches, playoff coaches, and elite offensive line teachers from every level of college football and pro. Go to thecoolclinic.com to get your ticket today. The link is in the description. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at The Cool Clinic and at Coach K. Grabowski.